Welcome to Kunzy Podcast English, a place where stories breathe, hearts are heard, and hope is never far away. Have you ever wondered what happens when a mother of three has nothing left but a broom in her hand, a tiny rundown apartment, and a stack of unpaid bills? When the whole world turns its back, but she still stands? Today, you'll hear a story not just about pain, but about purpose. Not just about struggle, but about strength. This is the story of Nora, a single mother who walked through life's storm barefoot, carrying her daughters in her arms, and found a miracle in the most unexpected place. If you're feeling tired, lost, or on the edge of giving up, don't go anywhere, because this story might just be the light you've been searching for. Some people are born at the finish line, and then there are those like Nora who barely step into life before being thrown into survival mode. At 33, she should be enjoying the stability of a complete family, with a warm home, a loving partner, and 3 little daughters laughing in the yard every afternoon. But life doesn't work that way. Nora had nothing, no husband, no parents, no relatives to turn to, and not even a diploma to compete in the harsh job market. What she did have were 3 things: a pair of worn hands, a heart that loved deeply, and 3 little girls who gave her a reason to keep going. Emma, Grace, and Luna simple names, but they were Nora's entire universe. Each child was a piece of her heart, a reminder of everything she was fighting for. Emma, the eldest at 10, had already learned how to clear the table, help care for her sisters, and read the fatigue in her mother's eyes after long nights of work. Grace, age 7, bubbly and talkative, truly believed Mom is a superhero, though she didn't understand why superheroes always looked so tired. And little Luna, just 5, often woke in the night from cold dreams. She had never known the warmth of a soft bed or a new coat, yet she clung to her mother as if the world was still filled with light. Nora once had a mother, but that was long ago, so long that the memory of her touch had faded, replaced by a hollow ache that only deepened over time. Her mother died when she was still a child, and the loss carved a permanent hole in her heart. Years later, when Nora herself became a mother, she finally understood just how deep that wound was. But she had hope. She had a husband once, a man who had held her hand in a modest wedding and promised, "I'll always be here." Yet on one cold winter morning, just as baby Luna was learning to crawl, he left. No note, no explanation. No support. Nora stood there in an empty room with 3 crying children and a heart that shattered into silence. The man who once whispered love had disappeared like he never existed. From that day, Nora became the sole provider not just for a household, but for 3 fragile lives. With no qualifications and no job experience beyond cleaning, she took the only work she could find: freelance house cleaning. No contracts, no insurance, no holidays. Every month she hunted for clients, anyone needing help cleaning a home, an office, post-party messes, or public restrooms. She said yes to everything. No job was too dirty, too degrading, or too hard. She couldn't afford to say no, because if she didn't work, who would buy Luna's milk? Who would pay the electric bill to keep Grace's light on at night? Who would cover Emma's school fees and her dream of becoming a doctor? They lived in a cramped apartment in Willow Creek, barely the size of a small classroom. Every corner told a story of sacrifice: worn couches, secondhand tables, patchwork blankets. Beneath the peeling paint were nights Nora spent wide awake, afraid to turn on the heater for fear of the utility bill. Every month, rent was a looming shadow. She didn't know if she'd make enough. She didn't know if they'd be thrown out. Her life was a constant tightrope walk, one slip, one emergency, and everything would collapse. Some nights, after cleaning an office building until 10 p.m., Nora would walk her daughters home. The wind would bite at their cheeks, and Luna would shiver in her thin, hand-me-down coat. Emma held her mother's hand tightly, while Grace coughed softly as they walked. No one complained. No one asked, "Why do we live like this?" The girls had already learned, and Nora, with each step, felt the weight of her failure as a mother, though she never let it show. She couldn't stop. She wasn't allowed to fall. Behind her were 3 little lives depending on her strength. There were moments she wished for a call, a voice asking, "Are you okay?" A hand to reach out and say, "Let me help you." But dreams like that were luxury, and she had stopped believing in miracles long ago. She didn't want romance. She didn't crave flowers or candlelit dinners. All she wanted was a steady job, a leak-free roof, and maybe, just maybe, a night of sleep without fear. This was Nora's life, brutal, unforgiving, and yet incredibly brave. She didn't have time to cry. She didn't have permission to be weak. She was a mother, and mothers must be strong, even when their hearts have broken 1,000 times. Have you ever seen a woman like her? Maybe you passed one on the street scrubbing windows at a cafe, or crossing a snowy road with 3 little kids in tow. You may not have noticed, but behind those weary shoulders is a world of silent battles. Nora is one of thousands of single mothers fighting every day, unseen, unpraised, but undefeated. And this is just the beginning of her story. A woman with nothing, no safety net, no rescue in sight, armed only with the love she held for her daughters. A story that might seem ordinary, until fate came knocking. And from that moment, everything changed. A mother's strength and unwavering love. Some women are born to be mothers, not because they are fully prepared or have everything in their hands, but because their hearts are made of something extraordinary, resilience, tenderness, and a love so deep it defies reason. Nora is one of those women. Before the first light of dawn breaks the horizon, while the city is still wrapped in sleep, Nora quietly wakes up. She tiptoes past her sleeping daughters, throws on an old jacket, and steps out into the cold morning air. She doesn't have the luxury of being tired, let alone sick. Each day, she takes on 3 to 4 cleaning jobs, offices, houses, sometimes even public restrooms. These are the tasks most people avoid, but Nora accepts them all, because to her, every dollar earned is a step closer to a future where her children no longer have to suffer. There were days when Nora had a fever so high she could barely stand, when her body trembled from exhaustion and her vision blurred. But the thought of her 3 girls waiting at home for a small bag of bread and a cheap carton of milk gave her the strength to push through. Just one more step, she whispered to herself. One more step to cover tomorrow's needs. She didn't work for dreams of wealth, only for the hope of a life with fewer worries, a roof that doesn't leak, a pair of shoes without holes, a meal with more than just rice. At night, when the stores shut their lights and the neighborhood falls into silence, Nora finally returns to her tiny rented room. The bedroom light is off, but the gentle breathing of her 3 little angels fills the air. She quietly sits at the edge of the bed, watching their familiar faces. Emma with her brow furrowed as if dreaming of a math test, Grace clutching her worn-out stuffed bear, and Luna still sucking her thumb in her sleep. That moment makes her heart ache with emotion. All the fatigue melts away. The calloused hands, the time she was shouted at by strangers, the tears shed in public restrooms, all of it suddenly becomes bearable. Because seeing her children sleeping peacefully, healthy, and safe makes her feel blessed. No matter how harsh life gets, as long as her daughters are alive and well, everything is worth it. Nora never complains to her kids. Even when anxiety clutches her heart or her wallet holds only a few coins, she greets them with a smile every afternoon. She tells them fairy tales, pretends to be a princess or a superhero just to hear them laugh. She knows that a childhood filled with laughter is a shield against the wounds of life later on. And when they're finally asleep, that's when she allows herself to cry the tears of a mother who carries the weight of the world alone. There were nights when she couldn't sleep, not from work, but from fear. She worried that Emma might feel ashamed for not having new clothes like her friends. She wondered if Grace would someday ask why their father never came back. She feared Luna would be cold in winter without a proper coat. But above all, what haunted her most was the fear of not being able to give them a better future. And yet, instead of giving in, she chose to fight. She picked up extra work, saved every coin, asked questions, learned from kind strangers, and held on to a dream to open a small bakery where she could earn a living and still be present for her girls. A mother's love is perhaps the only thing on earth that can grow from nothing into everything. Nora had no assets, no family, no degree, but her love was strong enough to raise 3 girls in a world that often shows no mercy. Every hug, every time she brushed their hair, every sleepless night spent soothing their cries, these were the quiet, invisible proofs of her sacrifice. Nora is not famous. She doesn't have thousands of followers. She has never been on TV. But she is a hero, a silent, unwavering hero. And if anyone ever asks, what does unconditional love look like? They only need to look at Nora to find the answer. The unexpected accident on a cold, rainy night. It was a night like many others after a long day of work. Nora finished late. The sky had turned dark, heavy clouds blanketing the city, and a biting wind pierced through her thin, damp coat. Nora clutched a plastic bag, holding a few discounted loaves of bread as she hurried home, guiding her 3 daughters through dimly lit streets. The girls, shivering in their worn-out jackets and soaked shoes, didn't complain. They were used to this, used to the cold, the long walks home in the dark, and their mother's quiet determination. The alley leading to their small rented room was especially slippery that night. Rainwater gushed down the sides of the road, mixing with leaves and trash, turning the path treacherous. Nora kept glancing back, warning her daughters gently, "Stay close, don't slip." But then it happened so suddenly that time itself seemed to freeze. A sharp screech, tires skidding on wet pavement, a loud thud, and then the terrified screams of her daughters. Nora was hit. She didn't even see the car coming from behind. It all happened too fast. The impact threw her forward, her body collapsing onto the street. The bag of bread flew across the pavement. Her worn-out slippers lay behind. Everything became blurry. Luna's cries echoed through the rain. Emma was screaming for help. Then silence. Nora lay motionless in the cold rain, eyes shut, her body soaked in a mix of blood, mud, and water. The driver panicked, stepped out. People began to gather. Some shouted for an ambulance. Others held umbrellas over the children who were now trembling not just from the cold, but from pure fear. In that frozen moment, 3 little girls stood in the middle of the street, huddled together, unable to grasp what had just happened. The only thing they knew for certain was Mommy wasn't waking up. At the hospital, Nora arrived in critical condition. Severe head trauma, broken ribs, major blood loss. Doctors said she was lucky to be brought in on time. But what troubled them more was that no one came with her. No family, no emergency contact, no insurance. Just 3 children sitting silently in the waiting area, their eyes hollow, lips blue from the cold and fear. That night marked a turning point, not just because Nora nearly lost her life, but because, for the first time, the community around her began to notice her. The woman they often overlooked, the quiet cleaner who swept their sidewalks, wiped their tables, emptied their trash, was now fighting for her life. And suddenly, she wasn't invisible anymore. Waking up in the hospital and the fear of losing her children. When Nora slowly opened her eyes, the white ceiling above seemed like a blurred dream. The strong scent of antiseptic filled her nose, mixing with the steady beeping of medical machines around her. Her head throbbed and her body ached in every fiber. But the first thing that came to her mind wasn't the pain or confusion. It was fear. A deep, raw fear. Where were her daughters? Emma, Grace, Luna. Their names echoed in her mind, louder than any siren. She tried to move, but a sharp pain shot through her left leg, paralyzing her with agony. The IV lines and tubes tied her to the hospital bed. But what bound her more was the terror of not knowing what had happened to her girls. In that moment, she didn't care about her injuries. All she needed was to know that her children were safe. When a nurse gently walked in and told her that her daughters were unharmed and being looked after by a kind neighbor, Nora couldn't hold back the tears. She cried not from pain, but from sheer relief. The world for a moment felt like it had stopped spinning. Her children were okay. That was all that mattered. Then came the doctor's words, calm but serious. Her left leg was badly broken. She would need surgery. After that, weeks or even months of recovery. No walking, no working, no returning to her cleaning jobs. For a single mother with no savings and no support, this news felt heavier than the accident itself. She lay still, unable to speak. The sterile white walls around her felt colder than ever. Not because of the room, but because of the helplessness creeping into her heart. How would she pay the bills? Who would feed her children? What if she failed them? But even in that cold clinical room, with a battered body and a storm of fear inside her, something in Nora refused to break. Her love for her children burned brighter than any pain. She didn't know how, and she didn't know when. But she made a silent vow as tears streamed down her face. She would get up again. For them. Because somewhere outside those hospital walls, her children were waiting. And she was still their mother. After the accident, everything seemed to collapse around Nora. She lay there, motionless on the hospital bed, but her mind was spinning with a fear far greater than the physical pain. How was she going to survive? She could no longer work, which meant her only source of income had vanished overnight. The small amount she used to earn from cleaning jobs was never enough, and now even that was gone, like smoke in the wind. To make matters worse, the industrial vacuum she had borrowed from a friend, a crucial tool that helped her take on extra work, was broken during a job just before the accident. She didn't have the money to fix or replace it. Her friends, all struggling like her, couldn't offer more than sympathetic glances. Then came the blow that knocked the breath out of her. A call from a luxury store where she once worked part-time. During a shift, she had accidentally knocked over and broken a crystal decorative piece. She had apologized profusely and thought the matter was settled. But now they were demanding compensation $20,000. That number was unimaginable. To her, $20 was enough for a meal for her 3 daughters. But now she was being chased for a debt so large it felt like a joke, a cruel one. At that moment, Nora felt like the whole world was turning its back on her. No one to lean on, no way out, no hope. She had always been a mother who stood strong for her children, but now even breathing felt heavy. As silent tears soaked the pillow beneath her, Nora began to wonder, was this the end of her fight? Was fate telling her she had lost? But in the depths of that darkness, something was about to change. Something unexpected. Something that would rewrite everything. Just when it felt like every door had closed on Nora, when all that remained was the cold silence of a hospital room, something unexpected happened. No one knows exactly who first shared her story online. Maybe it was a nurse, moved by the haunted look in the eyes of the single mother. Or maybe it was a stranger who had overheard parts of her story whispered through the hospital hallway. But with just one photo of a tired, hollow-eyed woman and a few lines about a mother of 3 fighting to survive in a world that seemed set against her, the story began to spread. At first, it was just a handful of likes and sympathetic comments. But within 24 hours, the post had gone viral. People began to speak of Nora as a symbol, a quiet hero, a mother who refused to give up. One person wrote, "I see my own mother in her." Another said, "I've been where she is, and a miracle pulled me out. I hope she finds one too." And then the donations started to pour in. Small amounts at first, $5, $10, $20. No one was wealthy, but everyone gave what they could. They included heartfelt messages, "For dinner with her daughters," "For the bravest mother I've ever seen." You are not alone. Nora had no idea any of this was happening. She was still lying in bed, exhausted, her eyes staring blankly at the white ceiling above her. But then, early one morning, as she struggled to sit up and ask the nurse about her children, the phone next to her bed rang. An unknown number. A calm, steady male voice spoke on the other end. "Hello, Nora. You don't know me, but I read your story and I want to help." Nora froze. For a moment, she doubted it. She had heard too many empty promises in her life, faced too much disappointment. But there was something different this time. His voice didn't carry pity. It didn't hesitate. He didn't speak to her as someone who needed saving, but as someone he respected. "Help?" was all she could say, her voice breaking. "Yes," he replied. "Not because I pity you, but because you inspire. You're proof that courage doesn't need a spotlight, and people like you deserve to keep fighting, not alone." Nora didn't cry, but something inside her stirred. A small flicker of light pierced through the thick clouds of despair that had weighed on her for so long. It wasn't the money or the promise. It was the simple fact that someone truly saw her. Not as a burden, but as a fighter. The call ended. The man left no name. Just a promise, "I'll be in touch." Then the line went dead. Nora set the phone down. Her hands were still trembling, but for the first time in months, her heart whispered something she thought she had forgotten hope. And what that man was about to do next would change everything. That morning, the first sunlight streamed through the hospital window, gently casting a glow on Nora's pale face. She had just woken up from a restless night, her heart heavy with worry about her 3 little girls. Suddenly, there was a soft knock on the door. Before she could respond, it creaked open slowly. A group of strangers walked in. They weren't doctors or nurses, but there was something different about them. A warmth, a calm, a quiet sense of purpose. In their hands were bags filled with brand new children's clothes, school supplies, treats, and stuffed animals. Things that had felt impossibly far away from Nora's life lately. She stared at them, confused, overwhelmed, not knowing what to say. Why would strangers care? And then she saw him, a young man at the back of the group. He said nothing at first. He simply nodded and walked toward her bed. Sitting down, he gently rested his hand on the bed frame, as if to tell her, without words, that everything would be all right. His eyes were kind, not filled with pity, but with respect, understanding, and something deeply sincere. "We heard about your story," he said in a calm, steady voice. "No one should have to go through what you've been through alone. Today, you're not alone anymore." Just those words broke something inside Nora. Tears welled up and spilled over tears, not just of pain, but of release. It was as if a heavy weight in her chest had finally lifted. For years she had battled in silence, through sleepless nights, high fevers, aching limbs, and the unbearable thought of failing her children. Now, someone truly saw her. The man didn't ask many questions. He quietly handed her a document confirming that all her medical expenses, hospital fees, medications, even post-surgery care had been fully paid. Nora stared at the paper in disbelief. "Why would you help me?" she asked quietly. He smiled, softly, like a caring brother. "Because you've been fighting alone for too long. Now it's time the world fights for you." This wasn't just about money. It was about a hand reaching out at the exact moment she was about to fall off the edge. It was a reminder that even in the harshest seasons of life, there are people willing to do good simply because they can. A few days later, her 3 daughters arrived at the hospital, dressed in bright new clothes, clutching stuffed bears, their faces glowing with happiness. Seeing them safe and smiling, Nora felt reborn. She no longer felt alone. She started to believe in miracles again. And this miracle came from quiet, genuine kindness, strong enough to lift her from despair. It wasn't just a turning point. It was a rebirth. A new chapter in Nora's life had begun. Not just a chance to heal her body, but more importantly, a chance to heal her deeply wounded heart. The day Nora stepped out of the hospital, she thought the miracle had already happened. Her medical bills had been paid, her daughters were safe, and strangers had shown her kindness she never expected. But life, it seemed, had one more surprise waiting for her, one that would shake her to the core. The same young man who had comforted her in the hospital stood waiting by a car outside. He smiled and gently asked if she and her daughters would join him for a short drive. With nothing to lose and a heart full of gratitude, she agreed. The car ride was quiet, the girls staring out the window, Nora holding their hands tightly. They had no idea where they were going. After about 20 minutes, the car pulled into a quiet street lined with tall trees and blooming flowers. It stopped in front of a small, cozy house with white walls, green shutters, and a garden gate that looked like something out of a dream. The man stepped out, turned to Nora, and simply said, "This is your new home." For a moment, she didn't understand. She looked at the house, then back at him. "Ours?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Yes," he nodded, "yours. No rent, no debt, just a fresh start. A safe place for you and your daughters. You deserve that." Nora froze. Her knees weakened. Her hands covered her face as tears streamed down uncontrollably. She had spent years moving from one place to another, never knowing how long they could stay. She had fallen asleep, listening for eviction knocks, comforted her daughters when they cried from hunger, and prayed for just one day of peace. Now, standing in front of her was a front door she could finally call her own. The girls ran toward the gate, laughing, their laughter like music in the air. They opened the door to find neatly arranged furniture, soft beds, colorful curtains, and even a kitchen that smelled faintly of cinnamon and hope. A small note on the kitchen counter read, "Welcome home." For the first time in her adult life, Nora exhaled deeply, not from exhaustion, but from relief. The pain of the past didn't vanish, but it softened. She had a roof over her head, not just any roof, but one built on compassion and the belief that even the most broken lives can be rebuilt. This wasn't just a house. It was a symbol, a new beginning, a dream that once seemed impossible, now standing solid in bricks and wood. And as the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the porch, Nora stood by the doorway watching her daughters dance barefoot on the living room floor. In that moment, she knew something she hadn't felt in years. They were home. Nora once believed that after all the loss and pain she had endured, her life was only meant for survival. She never dared to dream big, because getting through each day had already been a battle. But one day, when she finally had a stable home and her daughters were safe, someone asked her a question that made her heart ache. What is your dream? That question didn't come from family or someone she had known for years. It came from a stranger, the very man who had helped her when everything seemed to collapse. And that one question awakened a dream that had long been buried deep inside her. Nora gently shared that ever since she was little, she had always loved baking. When she was still with her mother, whenever she felt sad or lonely, she would go into the kitchen to knead dough, mix sugar, beat eggs. The sounds and scents healed her little heart. Though they were poor, her mother always tried to spare a bit of money so she could buy ingredients. Each cake that came out of the oven was not only delicious, but also filled with motherly love, care, and hope. As Nora grew older, she continued baking, even in temporary kitchens with old, broken tools. Baking made her feel less alone, like she was still creating something beautiful amidst the chaos of life. The man who helped her listened quietly without interrupting. After she finished, he smiled softly and said, "If baking makes you happy, why not start today?" That one sentence was like a key unlocking the door she had long shut in her heart. He didn't just encourage her to follow her dream. He also connected her with a group of people who were willing to support her, from helping her rent a place, dealing with paperwork, to teaching her basic business and marketing skills. Everything was arranged gently and kindly, as if fate was finally trying to give back what had been taken from her. Nora's first bakery opened on a small street in autumn when the golden sun shone gently and the leaves began to fall. The shop wasn't large, but it was warm and filled with light. Inside, wooden shelves displayed cakes she had made with her own hands, fragrant apple pies, crispy cookies, and buttery loaves. These cakes weren't just recipes. They were the result of love, resilience, and gratitude. Each one told a story, a memory, and a belief in a better future. The first customer was a 6-year-old girl and her mother. They chose a small pink cupcake with a heart on top. They smiled and returned again and again. Soon, the community started to notice her, not only for her delicious pastries, but also for the extraordinary story behind them, Local newspapers wrote about her. A few TV shows came to film her shop. But more than fame, what made Nora happiest was simply being in her own kitchen every day, baking, smiling, and watching her daughters run around the shop with joy in their eyes. Her 3 daughters had grown a little older and were very proud of their mom. They helped clean the shop, served customers, learned to measure ingredients, and even tried making new creations. The bakery had become more than just a place to sell pastries. It was a place full of memories, where a painful past transformed into a beautiful new beginning. Every single day, Nora grew more in love with life, with each cake she pulled from the oven and with the people who supported her journey. And then one day, as the sun cast a golden glow through the window and leaves fell gently outside, Nora looked out and smiled. She was no longer the woman trembling in the cold rain, no longer the mother struggling against fate. Now she was a baker, a strong mother, and a living reminder that miracles do come. Maybe late, but they always come for those who never give up. Sometimes life pushes us to the brink of despair, to a place so dark it feels like there's no way out. But for Nora, her journey from a poor single mother to a joyful entrepreneur is not just a tale of overcoming hardship. It is living proof that kindness still exists in this world, quietly, simply, but more powerful than anything else. Every morning, when Nora steps into her small bakery kitchen, there's a new light in her eyes. The same hands that once scrubbed floors and carried heavy trash bags now shape dough, bake pastries, and lovingly hand over warm loaves to her customers. Every batch of bread is not just a product for sale. It is a symbol of her healing, a symbol of a long journey paved with tears, pain, and belief. Her 3 daughters, Emma, Grace, and Luna, now have the freedom to run and play in a cozy home, go to school fully supported, and smile brightly when their mother calls. No more cold nights huddled under a thin blanket in a temporary rental. No more dinners filled with silent tears because of hunger. Today, their meals are filled with joy, laughter, and dreams of the future. Nora didn't just change her own fate. She inspired thousands of others, people who are lost, hurting, or feeling small in a world that often feels too big. Her story touched countless hearts because it is raw, relatable, and carries a simple but powerful message. As long as you still believe, miracles will find you, even if they arrive a little late. Sometimes all we need in life is for someone to ask, "What is your dream?" That simple question woke Nora up. It gave her the courage to hope again, to stand, and to keep going, even when her legs still trembled. And when she dared to open up, to share her story, to accept help, the doors she once thought were locked forever suddenly began to open. No one is so wealthy that they never need help, and no one is so poor that they can't offer something, even if it's just a word of encouragement. Now, Nora is no longer the woman who silently wept at the side of a hospital bed. She is no longer the mother who scrambled each day just to feed her children. She has become a symbol of resilience, of unwavering faith, and more than anything, of the quiet kindness that can transform lives. Those who have met her say, Nora didn't give up, and so life didn't give up on her. During one community talk, Nora tearfully said, "I once believed I was just a grain of sand lost in a vast desert. But when helping hands reached out to catch me as I fell, I realized I was worthy of love. And now I want to share that love with anyone who feels lost. You are not alone." She also shared a heartfelt message for anyone reading or listening to her story. Believe in kindness. Hold on to your dreams, no matter how small they may seem. And if you're walking through the dark right now, don't be afraid to speak up. Maybe, just maybe, the light is already waiting for you, just like it waited for me. If you're reading this and feel your heart stirring, if Nora's story brought even a little warmth to your day, then that's exactly why we create stories like this. Because one true story, shared with honesty, has the power to heal. Please hit like to support Nora. Share this story with someone you think might need a little hope. And don't forget to subscribe to Kunzy Podcast English so you won't miss any of our future inspirational stories. Each week, we'll bring you a new journey, one where people refuse to be beaten by hardship, where faith is rekindled from the simplest acts of kindness. Because sometimes one story is all it takes to change someone's life forever.